You're listening to episode 151 of the D6 podcast.
I don't know anything more important in our society or in the kingdom of God than to help the church, help the family.
Discipleship is not an event, it's a way of life.
And one day it just hit me that discipleship at home was not about doing more. It was about inviting Christ into what we were already doing.
The goal of family ministry is not families sitting on the couch holding hands and singing Kumbaya. The ultimate goal is families that love God, love people, and make disciples of all peoples.
So that's why you're here. You're here to say 1 hour a week, as significant and as awesome as it is, we know that it's not enough and we want to be intentional with every hour.
You're listening to the D6 podcast. Here's your hosts, Ron Hunter and Jeremy Lee.
This is the family ministry podcast that helps you connect the church and home. And Ron, today we're going to be talking about, we spent a lot of time last week setting this up and teasing this episode. I referred to it as a must listen.
That's right.
And we've got, obviously, John Trent back, and we've kind of said that he's going to kind of follow up on his interview last week with some really fun stuff. But then we also have the father-daughter team that came and spoke at D6, Mike and Nikki LeJeune. And, you know, I have two sons, so I don't really know the father-daughter thing, but, you know, you have a daughter.
I do.
And
I do.
It is a special kind of relationship.
Absolutely. Our daughter is grown. She's married. And you know what? The relationship between a father and a son and a father and daughter are completely different for so many reasons.
Yeah, teach me.
Yeah, not only is the personalities of our children different, even if you have all one sex. You know, if you have all boys, you don't parent them the same way. But I'll tell you what, as a father, I just like, man, I'm so glad my wife helped me navigate through so many of those areas, because I'm like, sometimes we're just klutzy around our daughters and we don't mean to be. And we can be manly around them in a way that can give off the wrong aspects of it. In fact, this morning I was on the drive-in. I'm part of a mastermind group. Those of you out there who belong to
this
group.
I am too. Yeah. We should talk about that.
We should. And so one of the questions that we dealt with this morning is, what is God teaching you? What is God working? That was one of the questions we were working through, one of three that we worked through on our time. And I said, one of the things I confessed out loud is that God is teaching me how he is using my failures or my mistakes to constantly teach our children. You know, there are times our kids go through seasons where we reach back and when we can share the missteps we have made in order to encourage them. And that was part of the aspect. And Mike and Nikki bring to light something very similar in that they're learning from each other as they navigate really, I would say, difficult issues inside of a family. I was introduced to Mike LeJeune from one of our former speakers in Texas. He said, Ron, you need to be aware. And so I had a phone conversation, browsed through their book, and I was really blown away. And I thought, his recommendation was to bring Mike and have him speak because he's on the John Maxwell leadership speaking team and so forth. I thought, okay, good credentials. But as I got in their book, I'm like, I'd really love to have them up on stage sharing their story together. You were there at the conference this past year, and I know you're always over at the podcast recording area, but I'm sitting there watching as Mike and Nikki took the stage. And the one thing you know about TV shows, movies, what makes a TV show or movie really good? Let's walk through the characteristics. What makes it good?
Man, when there's good cliffhangers and the characters are developed very well.
Yes. And tension. Tension.
Yeah.
You know, one of the things I learned from Patrick Lencioni in a leadership book when we have meetings is there's got to be tension. Tension helps in that because we don't just rubber stamp things, we work through the issues. And that's what our families need to do, is be able to work through the issues. And when Mike and Nikki LeJeune stepped out on stage, they introduced the tension that rocked their family. And it's almost like we lived it right there with them in the moment. And I remember Nikki turning to her father and said, it was your fault that my life took that turn. And she was referring to the divorce of her parents. And what transpired and how they handled it. And it was almost like a therapy session they worked us through, right there on the stage. And as I watched the audience, they kept moving to the front of their seats, leaning into this conversation, very anxious. And then I got to relive it, Jeremy, because our international leaders review our content that we have here in the States, and sometimes they'll take different videos of our speakers over to our international conferences. And I watched Mike and Nikki LeJeune again in Singapore, and it was just really, really powerful.
And, our second guest today is John Trent. And, a guy like him, we're listening to him because decades of books and training and amazing reputation and just this long, tenure of just wisdom and truth. And as impressive as that is, as almost as equally impressive was Mike and Nikki's authenticity. That's what I experienced. It was just like, oh my goodness, it's like they are hiding nothing. And this relationship that we're watching here, it's real, not perfect, but just actually real.
It is.
And it's a goal I have with my boys that I don't get through this perfect, but they feel connected to my heart to heart. We feel connected to each other, and Mike and Nikki survived, and that was still intact.
Yeah. Do you find your boys pay attention more when you get a little bit more real with them, more authentic?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I think sometimes they're dealing with, if I can use Tim Kimmel language, they're using a performance idea. Well, I can't measure up to dad, or I can't measure up to mom, or I can't be the perfect son or daughter they want me to be. And the moment we let down our guard and show them how real we are, how imperfect we are, how, God has given us grace, and then we model that grace to them, it changes the relationship. It really, really does. And Mike and Nikki walk us through this very, very well.
And I've said this before. I just want to say it again because I think this is what this interview is all about. A true relationship with our kids covers so many parenting mistakes. Yeah. If I could just say that over and over and over again, because that's right. That is so a real relationship. Right. So what we're going to do is we're going to go into this interview, and that's what I want you to listen for and watch. If you're listening to Ron and I talk, and you're like, I kind of get it, but I'm kind of not all on the page. Just listen. Yeah. And just let it play out, and I think you'll understand a lot more of what we're talking about. So after the break, we're going to be talking to Mike and Nikki LeJeune. Before we jump into that break, we need to remind folks, because Easter is coming on April 21st. You guys have, hopefully still have a resource. I haven't checked to see if it's still hasn't been sold out. But you have your Easter guides that are kind of, by the way, not huge books, but just small, inexpensive pamphlets that you buy in bulk and hand out to families so they can do something as a family through the Easter season.
It is. In fact, the guide is only 12 pages long, and it provides 8 devotions that you can do with your family. And that's the part, is we want this to be interactive. You're about to hear Mike and Nikki LeJeune talk through interaction. The one thing we can do to keep health going is constantly have those faith talks. And this is a tool to have those kind of faith talks around one of the biggest Christian holidays of the year. If it weren't for Easter, there's no reason for us to meet. We serve a resurrected Savior, and this is a chance to have those authentic talks with a tool that brings it up.
And they are available until they're sold out. And if they are still available, you guys will get them to the church in plenty of time to be able to hand out for Easter. So if you're interested and you want to check and see if this is still available, d6family.com/Easter is how you found out more about that. All right, so let's head into the break. Right after the break, we have done plenty of teasing and setting up for this interview. Now it's time to actually do it. You can listen to Mike and Nikki LeJeune when we come back.
The DNA of D6 provides any church an opportunity to plan, strategize, evaluate, and refine their approach to discipleship and family ministry. Dr. Ron Hunter's book shares vital philosophy and strategy built on the foundation of Deuteronomy 6. Readers will be able to build on this foundation to disciple every generation in their church. Each book comes with a free church health assessment. Visit d6family.com to find helpful coaching sessions and resources, and order your copy today.
Hey, Hey, I'm with the LeJeunes today, and I'm so proud I said their name correctly the first time. Hey, I'm with Mike and Nikki. Thanks, guys, for being here.
It's a pleasure.
Thanks,
All
Jeremy.
right, let me tell people about who y'all is. All right, Mike, he is the president of Simple Leadership and has a fascinating background. You were, in essence, a headhunter for a while. Then you taught leadership in the corporate world for a while. And now you're doing Bible studies, podcasts, work. He just spent a lot of time telling me everything he's doing. I don't even know what to say. Wow, way to go. And then we have Dr. Nikki over here, who is, let me see, a mixed animal veterinarian. Now,
Yes.
Why mixed animal? What does that mean? What's the difference?
So I don't just work on mixed animals. It means that I work on small and large animals.
There you go.
Yes.
Because I was like, wait, like you have to be a mutt for you
Yes,
to...
only mixed breeds.
I thought it was a Dr. Doodle animals or something.
No, no. Unfortunately, they don't talk back.
So she, and a little note here, she's also done community theater. So
have a little bit,
singing
yes.
veterinarian.
Yes, and the people I work with will tell you it's very true. They call me Snow White because I usually end up singing at work.
So what's incredible here between these two, and what we're going to talk a lot about today, is they have co-written a book together called Father's Love, the general bridge that changes hearts forever, with her father, Mike LeJeune. Perfect. So let's start with this. Nikki, tell us about the book, A Father's Love. Where did it come from? Why did y'all choose to do this?
Yeah, so that's a good question. I think a lot of people ask it. We never, I think, intended the book to happen. It sort of started as a joke. We had a family friend staying with us for a while, and I was home from college at the time, and we were telling stories over breakfast one morning. And in the middle of laughter, our family friend says, "You guys should write a book." And we kept laughing and went, wait, we should write a book. And over the next 2 or 3 years, started to compile. He had a blog and I had a blog at the time, so compiling stories that we'd already written. And then kind of we had a little book workshop that summer to kind of nail down the gaps that we had between our blogs to create what is A Father's Love.
So, Mike, what's A Father's Love about? I mean, it's a collection of stories, but what's kind of the point of it? What do we get from it?
The heart of it is it's stories about Nikki and myself, Nikki and my dad, Joe, and me and my dad. And it was kind of interesting. I was trying to write a book on leadership, and I was just writer's block. Nothing was coming out. My wife kept telling me, you never need to write a book. And my dad passed away in April of that year. And over, I guess it would be Memorial Day weekend, I woke up about 4 o'clock in the morning because I've been sleeping for the last couple of months, and walked to the breakfast in my bathrobe and flipped open my laptop and sat down and wrote the introduction of the book. And when my wife woke up, she came to me and said, "What are you doing?" And when I said, "Let me read something I just wrote." And it turned out to be the introduction to the book.
Wow.
And it felt like I was taking dictation. It was like a one take thing, and it just poured out of tears flowing down. And I realized it was taking the power of how much my father loved our family and tried to instill the essence of family, and realizing as the book started coming out how many times I made mistakes with Nikki as she was growing up, doing some really kind of silly things sometimes. And also some other things that just didn't convey to her the importance that she had in my life at the time. It turned into life lessons. And when I asked Nikki the question, why do you want to write this with me? And she said, "Dad, if people could read this and get an understanding of what it's like to be loved so much by not just us, I mean a father, but our Heavenly Father, and maybe be healed in some facet somewhere in their life," said, let's do that. And so we did.
Okay, so it's a collection of stories. Just heads up, I'm going to ask each of you your favorite one of the stories. And Nikki, let's start with you. Tell us your favorite story from the book.
My favorite story, that's hard. There are so many. I think it has to be the Pokemon Snow Globes. I do. I think it is. So I am an only child. And so growing up, Christmas has always been a very big deal. And my parents were very big on making sure that I believed in Santa. And I would create ways to prove that Santa was real. So I would make my mom drive me to the post office. I would sit in the seat behind her, and I would mail my sealed envelope letter to Santa in the mailbox because I didn't want her to read it, because then she would know what I wanted for Christmas. So it was like a surprise, I would never tell them what I wanted, but they always somehow knew what I wanted. I talk a lot. I guess it's not that big of a surprise. But then I started to make up things, so toys that didn't exist. And one year it was a Pokemon snow globe. I was big into Pokemon. I was hanging out with the boys and playing trading cards when I was 6 and 7, and I loved snow globes. I collected them whenever we went on vacation. So that year, Dad asked, "Well, what do you want for Christmas?" And I said, "Pokemon snow globes." He's like, "That sounds like a great idea, honey." And my mom's in the back, like crossing her arms, going, "No, that's a bad idea." And after he finished talking to me, she comes up to me. She goes, "Mike, they do not make Pokemon snow globes." So he had to set about finding how he could make a Pokemon snow globe. So he went to Hobby Lobby, got a snow globe making kit. Little Pokemon keychains, cut the keychain off. And
no, he didn't.
Oh, he did. He got a clay set and modeled little clay trees. They look like little alien landscapes, but it's cool because they're Pokemon. They probably live on other planets, maybe. I don't know. When I was 7, it didn't matter. An artist you're not. I'm sorry. I love you. But I came down Christmas morning, and the presents were stacked all over the place, and they hadn't wrapped the Pokemon snow globes. They just set them out on the different stacks of presents. And I just screamed, "Santa's real. He's real." And it was so just that moment of knowing Santa's real. And when I later found out that my dad made the snow globes, it was just overwhelming that he wanted so badly for me to believe in that he had done that for me. So it was
how incredible.
It's pretty cool.
I need to see pictures of Pokemon snow globes.
We have them somewhere. We'll have to find them.
Yes.
I'll send them over to you. So the life lesson that comes out of that for me was that as parents, it's not that we're supposed to teach our children that Santa's real. But I think that we were called to, with our children, to create an atmosphere of hope. Because we need to stay in that gap with them, so that no matter what they try to take on in life, there's a hope in there. Because when you do that, you fuel them. And today they get beat down so much in peers and social and trying to figure out how do they become independent young people. And I think hope is because that's what Scripture is about. It's to create an atmosphere of hope. And so that's why we have to step into that space.
Okay, your favorite story. I'm ready.
Oh, man, I was trying to pick the one that I want. The one that I think is just kind of, it would probably be about Nikki's brother.
Oh, Lord.
I thought you said you're an only child. I'm confused.
Yeah, that's the point.
Well, she is. At one point in time, I really liked playing golf. I got a chance to play quite a bit of it. And I always felt like I wasn't a great golfer, but if I had the right tool, the right resource, I could do better. And so I went out and I invested in a tailor-made driver. And I figured with this thing, I can just spank the ball. And I remember coming home with it, and we actually went to a weekend away, and I brought Taylor with me, and I'm on the couch, and I'm kind of cleaning them before we go off to play golf.
He says cleaning them. He would lay on the couch with his golf club.
Well, I was laying down
and watch television.
Yes, well, it was
with his golf club.
So there was a joke we had at the time that, well, Nikki, this is your brother Taylor.
I was desperate. For siblings. So I was siblings. Like, it's my brother.
And then it didn't work too well. So then I went out and bought the 3-wood, which is used in the fairway. And since I already had one named Taylor, I couldn't name the second one Taylor, so it became Tyler. So I had Taylor and Tyler. And we went on a family trip to Vancouver, Canada. And I brought my golf clubs. I was going to play golf in Canada in the mountains. And coming from Texas, that was going to be just a heady experience. And so I had the bag with my golf clubs, and they were in the trunk of the car, and we're heading off on the ferry. And we got out of the car, and Nikki sort of walked off, and this lady was talking to her. And she said, "Well, where's your mom and dad?" And Nikki pointed out, "Well, they're over there."
Real quick, I'm 5. Let's just talk about this.
Yes, you're 5. I'm 5. We probably should stick that in there because she goes, "Well, do you have any brothers or sisters?" She goes, "I have 2 brothers." I go, "Really? What's their names?" She said, "Taylor and Tyler." I said, "Where are they?" "Oh, they're in the trunk of the car."
You made our producers laugh. They haven't responded all day. Way to go.
And so the lady needed to made a beeline to Nikki's mom, and who was talking fervently to keep us from going to whatever the Child Protection Service
or in
of
Canada.
Canada's like. So,
and the lesson from that? Don't put your kid in the trunk of the car?
So those are the kind of the story. They're just life examples, life situations of what it's like trying to raise a child. So it's been a great journey. So
it's I don't have to wonder that y'all are close. And that you enjoy laughter and humor.
Yep.
We do. And part of our problem with the book is we both love laughter and humor, and we do have some really great stories, but there were also some times that weren't so happy, as in any family. So we wanted to balance our successes with our struggles. And so we do have some parts of the book where we talk about, okay, here are some places where we, both of us, as a child or as a parent or as a teen, we didn't do what we should have done or what we wanted to do. So trying to show people that, yes, we had so many wonderful experiences, but it wasn't perfect. It was hard, and sometimes we made mistakes, but hoping to show people that, one, there's hope, but two, maybe help them not make the same mistakes.
And recognize that if you do, that, as we'll talk about tomorrow, there's redemption if you can learn to say, I'm sorry.
Incredible. Y'all got me going. I've lost track of my question. I don't think we've asked one of the questions that we've...
Just the first one.
All right. So let's walk through stages of your relationship. Let's just do it this way. Mm-hmm. You mentioned when you were a teenager. Mm-hmm. Because if fathers and daughters that are going through the teenage years, what did he do for you that was helpful? And then what are some things you wish he could have done differently?
Well,
do I need to leave the room now?
No, I want to hear. Because you've self-admittedly said you weren't perfect, so I feel like we're free now to talk about that.
We talked
we literally
about
published.
That.
We put it on paper.
Yes.
I
travel around talking about this.
Yes. So, God, that's really good. I think, a lot of parent-teen relationships are hard because that's where, teenagers are trying to stretch their legs. They're trying to see, okay, where do I fit in the world? What are my responsibilities, or what are some of the privileges that I can have? And so I think that sometimes parents will run into behavioral issues with their teens. And for me, that was kind of hard because I wasn't perfect, but I was a really good kid. Mm-hmm. I was a bit of a goody two-shoes. I loved to follow the rules, and I definitely did not get into trouble. So for us, I think one of our biggest struggles was communication. I still, love happiness, and I don't love sadness. I'm much better now at conflict management, but I wasn't back then. So I would tend to run into these situations where he would do something inadvertently that hurt me, and instead of telling him Dad, that wasn't cool, I would just kind of shove it down and pretend that it didn't happen, which you can't do. So I think a lot of the things that we did was just trying to figure out how to talk to each other. And for us, it actually wasn't talking. We always wrote letters growing up. Whenever I went off to summer camp or, anything like that, my dad would always put letters in my suitcase so that I had them while I was gone. And so we started writing letters to each other. So when it was too hard for us to talk, we could put it on paper. And that way it took off, some of the pressure of having to confront each other while still getting our message across. And that kind of opened some doors and allowed us to eventually be able to talk about things and realize that, we're not going to judge each other. We're in this together. We're stuck for life. So, we might as well figure out how to talk. And so I think that was one of the biggest things in my teenage years. I think also the father-daughter relationship is unique. It's similar to a mother-son relationship because neither person really understands what the other went through. My dad has never been a teenage girl, and I will never be an adult male. So we have this thing where we won't ever quite understand each other. But I'm going to marry a man one day. And so my dad, not anytime soon, don't worry,
Just checking.
Big guy, you can leave the room now. So I think one of the biggest things he did kind of all throughout the years was just teaching me, what I should look for as a woman and as a woman of God, what I should look for in the man that I choose to spend the rest of my life with. And so that started when I was a little kid, 4, 5, 6, when he took me on dates to the movies and to plays, and followed through with, chauffeuring me to freshman homecoming, and, taking me out for dinners and buying me flowers. He used to joke he would take me out for fancy seafood dinners and say, I'm trying to set the bar high so no man can ever attain this. And my favorite meal was red snapper with white limb crab meat, which is not a cheap dinner. And so whenever
that was at 6 years old, she fell in love with that.
Man.
Yeah, so he started early. But he would always tell me, he would go, now remember, honey, this is not a thing you can order on dates. But I think that he did a good job of kind of showing me the respect that I deserve. And even though things weren't always perfect, he kind of outlined for me what I should look for.
So if there's a young man who has a new baby daughter, and you get to go and consult with him and talk to him about his journey as a dad with a daughter, what are some of the highlights you're going to give him?
First one I'll tell him is the advice was given to me by my youngest brother. He was actually had the first baby in the family, so he was actually ahead of me. And when Nikki was about to be brought into the world, he pulled me aside and said, let me tell you something. My brother was not a man of many words.
And that's how he talks.
He said, let me tell you something. You know nothing. I went, what? He said, you know nothing. When she comes home from the hospital, have a grandmother in the house. And it was very wise, because I still remember the day that she was put into my hands, because the first words I was blessed to speak to her is, how could anybody not believe that there's a God? And those were the first words I spoke over to. So the reason I say that is that speak about God from the very beginning and as much as possible. Because when you start planting seeds, God will then take and water them and grow them over a period of time. The second is to recognize that you're going to need to say, I'm sorry. And dads have a hard time with that, because we have this mental thing in our head that our job is to protect, provide, to be. And especially with a daughter who have very tender hearts, a dad can pierce their hearts with words in ways that nobody else can. And we make mistakes sometimes. And I was thinking about the one when Nikki was asking me to go off on some trip in high school. And I was, saying, I was thinking as she was asking about it, and I said, no, I was not kind of in favor of it, and then she quit talking. And she, when she got to the house, she ran up to her room, and I said, what's wrong with Nikki? I mean, she just got quiet, she shut down. And my wife turned to me and said, well, it's your fault. And I said, well, what do you mean? And she said, the way you answered the question, it wasn't a discussion, it was a directive. I said, it was not a directive, it was a discussion. And she wouldn't talk to me. She said, your voice sounded like it was a directive. And so I went up to her room and sat on the bed and put my arm around her, and she started crying. And I know you can't tell this, but I'm a real John Wayne kind of guy. I never cry except at, like, not Hallmark commercials, but AT&T commercials and anything else. So
it's allergies, right?
It's allergies. And so we had a kind of tender moment, and I just stepped into a place where I said, I'm sorry. And I think that we as parents, we really run into a problem with perfection. As dads, we fight a battle with what might be perceived as weakness. And emotion is not a weakness. It's actually a gift given to us by God to help us process life. And I think with our daughters, we need to be able to connect with them heart to heart. And the emotion is the only thing that's going to help us to do that. And there's going to be times, like my brother says, that you know nothing. And you got to be prepared to say, I'm sorry, I have a discussion about it.
Well, guys, this was fun. Really, truly. I knew nothing about your book and never met y'all, and I feel so connected to you. What that means is our listeners are going to feel connected as well. And I hope if you feel connected that you guys will grab a copy of their book. If you want to learn more, you can go to lightingthepath.net. You can grab their book there and read, I'm assuming, some of their blogs and learn more. Thank you guys for being with us.
Yeah, thank you.
It's been fun.
What if you could multiply your ministry 168 times over? We have a way for you to do that today. We believe that true discipleship is attained through diligently studying God's Word and applying the Scriptures to your daily life. Spending 1 hour each week out of 168 in a worship service is simply not enough. D6 devotional study guides are here to help. Each week, everyone in your family studies the same theme, with lessons and devotions appropriate to each age level. Moms and dads will love the devotions and articles as conversation starters. Children will love reading and playing games in their own devotional study guide. Families will love spending time together during the week discussing and studying the Scriptures. To learn more about the D6 devotional magazines, you can go to d6family.com/D6 curriculum.
Jeremy, thank you for walking Mike and Nikki LeJeune through, I think, such a awe-inspiring interview because of the realness, the rawness there, how you brought out from them those qualities we want to aspire to, how we can come alongside of our kids and understand how love is displayed more than just in a word, more than just saying it, but acting it. I really want to say thank you for that. And last week, you told us about John Trent, and you, again, with your interview skills, you had recognized how blessing can be such a great thing for our family, but sometimes we're not aware of what we should do, and sometimes we do things we shouldn't do.
Yeah, when I talk to parents in parent seminars and things like that, one of my big themes is that God gives us a superpower as parents. I believe it. What I tell people is, based from what I've learned from John Trent, is that we don't bless performance. We don't just say good job on your grades or you're a great cheerleader or we don't bless performance. But our spiritual superpower comes when we start to bless identity. When we say to our kids, you remind me of this quality of God, or when we hold up a mirror to our kid's soul and say, this is how God sees you, because our kids believe it. Because like has been said so many times, our words as parents weigh more in the hearts of our kids than anybody else's words.
Yes,
and so that is powerful. But equally as powerful, and unfortunately, as ministry leaders, we see this way more than we want to see it, is that can be that superpower can be completely reversed. And like in the great superhero movies, there can be the villain.
That's right.
And so as parents, we have just as much power to curse, and that curse lasts. Just like the blessing lasts.
Yes.
And I was just so interested to hear. And one of the things about this interview is sometimes we can curse without meaning to, and we talk about that with John as well. It's short, but it's a great understanding, a great way to think about this concept. So let's listen to John as he kind of talks to us about the effects of what happens when parents bring a curse to the family. Well, we have our friend back, Dr. John Trent. Now, this is a little bit of a shorter interview, so we're going to have to work hard. Yeah. And I'm not going to be able to give your full bio this time, Dr. Trent, because it would take the whole 10 minutes.
Less is more, yeah.
Dr. Trent, he's the author of the book, The Blessing, is how many of you will know him. But he's written 20 books and won many of awards. He's a professor. He trains counselors. Proud to be a husband of his wife, Cindy, and a father of his 2 amazing daughters. See, I summarized that pretty good.
That's good. I like that. Yeah.
Now, we've chatted a couple times, actually, and we talked about the power of the blessing. And
right.
We also talked about blessing in marriage and those kind of things. But I want to talk today about the curse, because a blessing is like a coin, isn't it? It has 2 sides.
Yeah.
Yet we can bless. God has given us the power and freedom to bless.
Right.
He has also given us in our relationships the power and freedom to curse. And I'd like to talk a little bit about that impact.
Right. Well, interestingly, when I started out that book and studying the blessing, it came from, I was working in a psychiatric hospital. I know there's been some question. I was working there. And I was sitting next to this young guy. He was a senior in college, and he had just tried to take his life because he had gotten, and this is, talk about a tough situation, but he had just got his first B as in boy, not D as in dog. And first B, and it was in a non-major PE course that he sucked at and gets a B, and he couldn't go back. He didn't feel like he could go back and face his dad, who was a straight A, and he literally tried to take it, and it would have bled out if his roommate hadn't have come back. And as I was sitting there and talking with him, and then I go home that night, and I'm getting ready for a study on Genesis, and I read Genesis 27, and it's this guy named Esau. And it says, when Esau heard the words of his father, that he would never get the blessing, he cried out with an exceedingly great and bitter cry and said, bless me, even me also, O my father. And he lifted up his voice and wept. And all of a sudden I realized, gosh, that's exactly what that young guy was saying I was sitting with all at the psychiatric hospital, was, there is this deep sense when we miss the blessing. And do you know what the word curse literally means? Deuteronomy 30:19 says, behold, the Lord says, I set before you a choice, life or death. In other words, we need to choose life in him, opposed to stepping away. Life means movement. Death means to step away. But he says, life or death, the blessing or the curse. And like you said, the blessing means to add value to somebody, like you're adding a coin to their life. Gosh, you're so valuable, I'm going to add to your life. But the word curse literally means to dam up the stream. So I'm from Arizona. Have you ever been to Arizona?
Mm-mm.
Okay. Well, are you still in, where's home?
Nashville.
Is it Nashville still? Okay. So, when you drive over a river and there's a bridge and it says there's a river, when you look down, what do you see typically?
Water.
Okay. I mean, a lot of water at this point, but the point is, in Arizona, if you drive over a bridge and look, you're going to see what? Nothing. Because there's only 2 rivers in the whole state that run all the time. I mean, if there's a flash flood, you get more rivers. But the point is that, think about that. When you curse someone, that is somebody in your life who has pulled away life-giving water from you. Which is why I think the woman at the well, remember, she had 5 different times she'd had these broken marriages. Now she's living with the 6th guy. And what does Jesus, with all that subtraction, what did Jesus offer the woman at the well? He offered her living water, because it is a personal relationship with Jesus that reverses the curse. So anyway, that's just kind of an overview of the curse. I think why it hits us so deeply, why it's so hard for us to deal with, is because somebody in our life, pulled something away from us. Their love, their blessing, that special future, them feeling like, we're feeling, we're valuable, that kind of a thing.
I think parents, there's an obvious way to talk about how parents can curse their children, which is aggressively. That is kind of obvious. But let's talk about some of the inadvertent ways that parents can curse their kids. Like, for example, I know you've taught me so much about blessing. And when I speak to someone about what it means to bless, I talk about a spiritual blessing, we're talking about blessing their identity, not as much their performance. But sometimes parents can obsess about performance, ignore identity, and even in that, they think they're doing great, but even in that, that's a bit of a curse. And there's other ways. What are some subtle ways that maybe parents can be made aware of that, hey, you're cursing without meaning to?
Yeah. Well, again, you're right. Kind of expectations on a kid that I can't tell you how many times I've talked to somebody and, boy, they end up going into the family business because, or if they don't, all of a sudden, they're shunned. Mm-hmm. And but so as long as they do, so there's this feeling of, well, the blessing is so conditional, for in a home, and really and truly, it isn't when you look in Scripture. It was an unconditional, really attaching value to somebody, and people need that. They need to know that. So I think another way, you mentioned certainly, the super high expectations, or they're just praising them when they do well. They don't. But I think another thing is just like you just went on a you're here on a trip. We're at the D6 conference, and one of the things sometimes we do is we forget that we think, well, hey, I'm just going on a trip, so I've gone. But one of the things I'd always try to do with my kids when I went on a trip was help it to not be a parentheses. Now, here's what I mean by that. You're going to be gone physically, right? So if it was a long trip, I'd make these sacks, and inside the sack, I'd have written out a little note, and there'd be a small treat, something that Cindy approved. Do you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
It wasn't a big deal, but this is when they were younger, and so like on Monday and Wednesday, and then I'm coming home on Friday, but they have this, they've got this bag that they're gonna at night. I would, I'll call, and before they go to bed, try to work it out to where I can just call and pray a blessing over them. So even I think sometimes we figure, it's just 4 or 5 days. I don't need to talk to my kids. My wife's got that covered, or opposite if the wife's traveling. Do you see what I'm getting at? And what we end up doing is pulling away, and thinking it's not a big deal. Well, there are times where you can't call home every day. I get that. But those are the kinds of things I think where we don't realize, gosh, it would be so easy to do something small that really helps, not just parentheses. For example, we got a placemat where it had the, United States. So I'd sit down with both girls before I went on a trip, and so here's a placemat. It's got the U.S., right? And I'd say, okay, where's our house? They'd point to Arizona, I'd say, okay, I'm going to North Carolina. Where's that? And they'd hunt around, and here it is. Okay, North Carolina. Okay, this is who I'm going to be with. Well, it's no longer just empty parentheses. So I get, it's like, so pray for me, hey, when I'm gone, and then, I'm going to try to stay connected. So that's another thing. I think sometimes we pull away just because we're busy. Or, can I share one more real quick? We start going through a burden. And I'm telling you, Jeremy, some people, frankly, it could be financial, it could be taking care of an aging parent, anything. See what I mean? But long story short is, people can wake up and miss a decade because they've been so consumed with this one burden. And maybe it's a special needs kid, and you've got to spend all that time there. But then the other kids, it's tough. It's a tough balancing act. But I do think, and so I'm not saying people are trying, kind of like you asked the question inadvertently, there's sins of omission and sins of commission, so we're not talking about, for a lot of parents, they just don't realize it. They just don't get it. Why do I need to hug them after they're 10? Because, I don't know, she's, starting to bloom, quote unquote, and the dad doesn't want to. Let me tell you, that's exactly when you should be doing that appropriate touch, because otherwise, she's going to be looking for it somewhere else. So there's lots of times, I think, where we just don't realize it's important to keep doing it or to do it. But we don't want to curse. We really want to bless.
We only have a few minutes left. Unfortunately, we should have planned more time for this. I promise you we'll revisit this again. But let's close with this thought because there's going to be, we have kind of maybe opened up wounds for people that are listening.
Yeah,
and we
yeah.
have to always, when we do that, be good stewards and give hope. So if I have received a curse,
Yeah.
and I'm recognizing that it was a curse as I listen to this, where do I begin coming out of that? Because we are not meant to live under a curse.
No. So here's a great verse, and I'm going to say it twice. So if you miss it the first time, write it down or just try to. But it's really Deuteronomy 23:5. So remember Deuteronomy 23:5, and it says this: "The Lord your God was not willing that the curse, that's subtraction, rest upon you, but the Lord your God." Second time, the Lord your God turned the curse into a blessing for you because the Lord your God, for the third time, little repetition there, the Lord your God loves you.
Wow.
Now there it is in one verse.
Man,
I mean, so I think if my dad, pulled away when we were 2 months old, and he cussed at me the day that he died, and I held his hand for 8.5 hours and prayed for him. He cussed at me for praying for him. He didn't know Jesus. He was just a broken, God bless him. And so some of us are not going to get the blessing. But I'm telling you, once we get God's blessing, then we can realize the truth of that verse. Man, it's Jesus' love, the Lord your God, with his love that can reverse the curse.
I think only you could have said all of that in just a few minutes. That was amazing. Dr. John Trent, thanks for being with us. We appreciate it. If you guys want to hear more about, check out the book, The Blessing, if you've never read it, or hear more about his resources, you can go to strongfamilies.com. Thank you for being with us.
Hey, thanks.
Now, if you've heard how Jeremy brought out that flip side as he so well described going into this interview, if you did not hear last week, you need to go back and listen to last week's episode and listen to the positive side of this, because that's where we started. It's called these two podcasts bookends, okay? So when we think about number 150, that's the first bookend, and 151 is the second bookend. One day we're not going to know what bookends are. Matter of fact, Jeremy, I'm putting it on my list right now. For Christmas, I'm going to buy you a pair of digital bookends. So you can hold your digital books together on the shelf, okay?
Thank you, Ron.
You got it. That's just for you, my friend.
You're such a friend. Okay, next week. I want to talk about next week because I'm a little geeked out about it, okay?
Yeah.
So we have, and the topic, people are going to love this. We have Dale Hudson. My youth ministry friends may not know much about Dale because he is a children's ministry giant.
Yep.
But he is a big speaker on the subject of leadership, which applies to whatever age grade we work with. So you're going to love it. In fact, listen to this. Here's his topic: if Disney ran your ministry and other leadership lessons. I think that's in itself is such a great title. I will tell you that I'm full of mystery about next week's episode. Listen to this. See if you like the way I'm going to say this. Because you know a little bit about what happens in this interview.
Yep.
Let's just say that someone crashes that interview. I'm sitting here talking to Dale, and right in the middle of it, a whole nother entity comes in and just completely blows it up and takes everything a different direction.
And you didn't expect that going into it.
Not expected, had no idea it was going to happen. Pleasantly surprised, and it turned into something fabulous. So totally fun moment that we'll get to share together.
And because
next
it was
week.
you made it work really well.
I guess
The bearded wonder.
No, seriously, it was so fun, and so much. There should be some anticipation on the listeners' end for that interview, and then our little podcast. Which, by the way, can I brag on our little podcast for a second?
We can. We'll have to do this at the beginning of another episode, though.
Okay, we'll do it. I'll save it. We got a little bit of recognition that I want to tell people about our little podcast. I'll tell you about that next week. But then we have a big announcement, and I'm going to just hold it there. We have a big announcement that we're going to make in our next episode about this podcast moving forward. We have some really fun additions that are about to happen, and I'm just going to leave it there.
That's right.
Because
I know what's happening, and you want to hear it.
Ron.
You want to hear it.
We
So
have
we'll
a
see
big announcement coming next week.
We will join you next week. Can't wait.
Have a great week of ministry.
You've been listening to the D6 Podcast. You can learn more about D6 at d6family.com.